I just need add a little nutmeg to my drink. Welcome to this live stream, everyone on YouTube. We're here, we're live. It's Thursday instead of Friday because, well, I've got things to do on Friday, like lots of things to do on Friday. Whew, it's exciting here. I am John Townsend, and we're going to be talking 18th century stuff. On the other side of this camera is Aaron on the console.
Hello.
There he is. And let's see, Kyle back on the question seat.
Hello.
And then Ryan's up here keeping everything kind of rolling and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you guys for doing your great job back there. And thank you for joining us. Let's see, what are we talking? If you want to help support what we do on the channel, because we're always making videos. We're having a lot of fun, but we need your support whenever possible. And so we've got several different ways you can help support us on our cooking channel and all the other kind of videos we do. Super Chat is running, so Super Chat is a way that people help support us. That happens like right here as we're doing the live stream. That's always fun. Also, a lot of folks support us through Patreon, and we've got a lot of new Patreon supporters recently, and that is really, really helpful. And Patreon is a way that people support us with just a small amount of money each month. So when people can support us that way, that is really probably one of the better ways to do it. Also, we have merchandise that people can go to our website and order, and we'll be talking a little bit about merch here later on. And what else is there? Well, whatever. Whatever.
They can hit PayPal.
Yeah, there's even
PayPal
a PayPal
works.
link down in the description. So we'll get there. That's out of the way. What's up next? This weekend, the reason why we're not doing a live stream on Friday is because this weekend we're going to be at Kalamazoo, Michigan at the Living History Show. Ryan and I are going to be up there, and it's going to be really, really good. The Living History Show up at Kalamazoo is one of the best springtime shows before everybody's got cabin fever, right? Everybody wants to get out and get ready for the next season. And Kalamazoo is an indoor show, so everybody kind of gets connected with friends, and they get to see lots of cool stuff because there are, hundreds, I'll say, vendors up there. Really, really great merchandise, including us, of course. But it's a great event to go up and connect with people and not have to be outside in the cold weather. So if you get a chance and you're in that Kalamazoo area, it's at the Kalamazoo Fairgrounds, the Expo Center. Excellent, excellent event. So we'd love to see you there, and come up to see us. What's next, Ryan?
Instagram contest.
Instagram contest.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
We got a winner.
And every week we pick out an Instagram person who's tagged Townsends. And if you've got something, if you want to participate, something that's historical or merch related, an unboxing, or just a historical picture, we'd love to see you engaging in that. We've seen a lot this week. It was a bunch of great pictures. But what is the winner up here?
This week we've got the Adrian Glenn, and I picked this one because we've done a lot of photos of people in clothing and cool rifles and waistcoats and all that stuff. But this one was really interesting because they made a recipe and they kind of took pictures of it along the way. It was really cool to see.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. Yeah.
And that's the steaks fried in ale one,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so, if you order a product from us, you could take a picture of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be you dressed up, just something that relates to this channel. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So Ryan's going to connect with him DM, and they're going to get a gift certificate out to him. So that'll be a lot of fun. So if you want to participate, we would love to see your pictures on Instagram. You can just hashtag Townsends, or you can, and also do a at Townsends _official, the Instagram channel that Ryan works with. So we would love to see your stuff there. There we go.
I'd like to say real quick, we talked about the email subscriptions a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we jumped up in like 200 subscribers in that week. It was awesome. So if you can talk a little bit about what the email subscriptions are, what that does for folks.
Sure. A lot of on our website, we're going to start doing a lot more number one, sales, but also short run products that we're going to be testing out. And if you want to see that stuff, you want to find out about sales or special products or new products that are coming out, you need to go to our website and sign up for the email list. And the big banner image right at the top, if you just click on that, it'll take you to the email sign up page, and you'll get the emails. They're short, they're sweet. Maybe they got a couple pictures. They're not very intense, so hopefully we won't fill up your inbox, but it'll be some fun stuff related to historical things in Townsends. So make sure to go sign up for the email list. I think it's time to talk about mugs.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know, a couple months ago, and a couple months before that, we had these really cool throwback mugs. That was from one of the last batches. So we're doing a special. They're on special right now, right, Ryan?
Yes, there's a link in the description.
There's a link in the description. During this live chat and for 1 hour afterwards, these guys are going to be at a special price, just $20. The last 2 times we did it, we sold out right away. I mean, within the day, they were all gone. This time I got a few more so that hopefully they won't sell off just totally instantly. But if you're interested, these are throwback mugs. I've changed the design a little bit on the front because I like them just a little bit better. I just keep tweaking this, and we picked out 2 brand new colors. This one that I'm holding here is the paprika color, kind of matte and a cool kind of orangey red. And then the one that everyone has said so far, it's like, nope, that's the best one. So far, the black with this sort of cool blue over the top of it. So that's the one everybody's liking so far.
So I didn't know that they were going to be on sale.
You didn't?
So
they aren't on
sale.
They're
$24, but I can go flip that switch. Should I go do that real quick?
You go flip the switch.
I'm going to go flip the switch,
Ryan's
and then I'll let you guys know when to go buy them. I'll be right back.
Don't buy them yet. Stop. No, if you've already purchased it while I was talking, I'll fix the amount later on before it ships, and we'll refund you the whatever.
Wow. You expect people to do their jobs around here.
Yeah. I asked him. Didn't I ask him? I said, are they on sale? And he's like, yeah, John, yeah. Oh, boy. So,
do we want to do some donations?
Yes, go ahead. Now it's perfect time.
I only have 2.
Okay.
But I'll do those, and I guess we can get on to the main topic. Okay, so €20 from Drew Zeilger. Hello from Germany. Visiting my roots in Bavaria this week and next. Thanks for all you do. Keep it up. Thank you, Drew.
Sounds like a fun trip. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the $20.
Yes, thank you. Euro.
There you go. Oh, totally different.
Yeah. Guns, knives, and beer. $10. Can you do more alcohol-related segments? That was a big part of the 18th century and today, too.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for that. And alcohol-related things. Yeah, there's this whole kind of thing, that alcohol's kind of looked on differently, at least now in North America than it was in the 18th century. And it was a big part of commerce. It was a big part of just plain saving your crops. That was, if you had too much of, fruit or whatever, you turned it into brandy or whatnot. So, yeah, it's a big part of just saving agricultural goods and as a commerce thing, turning your crops into something that was easily transportable and worth a lot of money. So a lot of that. So you're done there. Wow. Yeah, okay.
That's all I had for now.
So the topic today, and Ryan's supposed to be sitting there and prompting me with that. See, today I've been working nonstop like the last however many days, working on the catalog. We're just putting the final touches on the catalog, and Ryan's like, hey, what's the topic gonna be? And it's like, well, we can just do regular Q&A. And he says, no, it's gonna be on, and then he gave me a couple topics, and one of them was crime in the 18th century. And so that's what we're
keep in mind, we decided to do this like 20 minutes ago.
So I immediately said, okay, let's run with that one. So I'm ready for questions on that because I'm not just off the top of my head ready to come out with a narrative on it, except I guess I'll go in and I'll start off with the crime, and especially crime solving and police work and all that kind of good stuff. Completely different than what we think of today as that way. Okay, Ryan came back. He's back. He says he's got the price fixed. So if you want one of these really cool throwback mugs, now's the time, or in the next.
Was that
2
one of
hours.
the most embarrassing moments in Townsend's history? No,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Anyway, that whole crime solving thing and the whole idea of around police, so different than what we have today that it is hard to grasp, because we think of, you know, how police work today. It's kind of a global situation. Most places have a very similar police force, a very similar way of dealing with crime, and it was just you know, alien to us the way it was going on in the 18th century. Most of what I've read has been English. Actually, what's going on with crime in England. I certainly I've got some new books in my pile at home on my bedside that have to do specifically with American crime. So I'm not as versed in that, but it's such a great topic. And if you want to go to a website that gives you a real quick glimpse and the strangeness of it, the whole idea of it, there's a website it's called the Old Bailey Records. I'm not sure exactly what the URL is, but if you search that, and you can actually read the cases that were happening that came up to the Old Bailey Court right there in the 18th century. And you can read about all these different crimes. And it's really interesting to see what these people were brought in for, what their crimes were. A lot of times you'll get a glimpse into other kinds of things like clothing, because in those court records, a lot of what was stolen was clothing, which you wouldn't think, you know, that would come up all the time, but that's what you see all the time, is people stealing different pieces of clothing, and then they describe the kind of clothing. So it's really interesting to read those Old Bailey records, not just for, you know, what that particular crime was, but how it interacted, the kind of glimpses you get into regular life. And of course, a lot of these criminals are of the lower classes, so you get a little bit more idea about lower class living, which is a little harder to find in the records. Did you have any questions for me, Ryan? He's back there not doing this.
No, I'm told I was just Instagramming, which is part of my job. What questions related to
the crime thing? You know, the topic.
So I remember I was downstairs for a little while.
A lot happened while you were gone.
I think one of the more interesting things was when you were talking about that. I think it was the tobacco culture book, where it was talking about a lot of the trade for tobacco was fueled
We
by
picked crime, not
right, but it was fueled by criminals being brought over here.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay. We're looking for the connection between the two. See, he had already talked about how it's like, I want you to talk about tobacco and da-da-da. And it's like, okay.
I had a beautiful thumbnail ready of John looking at tobacco, and they said, no, we're not going to talk about that.
Because it would be John saying, hey, Ryan. Hey, Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Ryan is the resident tobacco expert.
I don't have the book here, but I did earlier, and it has to do with, and there is this connection between tobacco and crime in England, which does seem to be, like, okay, really? The one of the problems with crime it had to do with punishment. And in Britain specifically, because they had a very strict kind of criminal code, and they would, if you broke the law, even if though it was a fairly small crime, they might. I mean, depending on what the crime is, what we would consider a fairly small crime, that was the death penalty. And if they didn't do a death penalty, then you would be transported. It's sort of like kill them or send them away and, don't do anything to them. So it was a very strange, they didn't have, prisons quite like we do today or anything like we do today. And so many of these people, 50,000 people, ended up being transported to North America, and specifically the sort of Virginia, Maryland area, right there in the 18th century. They started transporting people about, I think it was 1718, something like that, transporting them. And that didn't stop until right during basically the Revolution. In fact, they kind of wanted to keep transporting people after the war, and we said no, we're done with that, and so they started transporting them other places. But those 50,000 people, so many of those became indentured servants or sort of indentured servant-like situation, and they started working in the tobacco fields, and that's where they got a lot of their labor. So some of that was enslaved people, Africans being brought over, and a lot of that was criminals being brought over to be working on that tobacco crop, because tobacco needed a lot of labor to it. It wasn't one of those simple things like, we popped some seeds in the ground and, we come back later and we harvest it 3 months later. I mean, how many steps are there? Ryan knows about growing tobacco.
You go through a lot of different steps in the process of from planting to harvesting.
Right.
It's a lot different than like our cash crop around here is corn, and you put it in the ground, then you detassel it, and then you harvest it. But
yeah,
it's a lot different with tobacco. There are several steps.
Yeah, and it was almost a year-round cycle on that. So that's what kind of it was a symbiotic relationship to a certain extent. There was a lot of demand for labor, and Britain wanted to get rid of all these criminals. But there was a bounce back on that too. They would part of that transportation was you can't come back. Right. So, and the penalty for coming back after you were transported was death. But there was almost a system where they would come off the ship and then, they would be on the next ship back. And they would have to sort of hide their identity when they got back to Britain. And sometimes they were captured and sent back, or, there was a lot to that whole situation. Really, really kind of fascinating when you read into that transportation issue of crime and what was going on in the 18th century.
Yeah, I thought, and this is away from that topic, I guess, of tobacco, and there was some assumption going on, but that whole raise your right hand.
Yes.
That was a really cool conversation, too.
Yeah, there was an issue of one of the other things they did. If you could read, you could get off on part of your sentence. They might not treat you as strictly. And so if you, it's like, well, we'll treat different people differently depending on their level of education. And one of the things they would do is they would brand you. So maybe they would generally brand the hand on a person. Depending on the crime, they might have different kind of letters. So if you stole things, maybe you had R for robber or M for murder or something like that. If you got off a little bit, they would even cold brand people. So if you were an upper class person and you still did the crime and they still wanted to punish you, but maybe they didn't want to really brand you, they would kind of faux brand you with a cold iron. It wouldn't actually brand you at all. They were just going through the motions. But one of the things they would look for if you wanted to see a criminal was to look for if they were branded. And sometimes they would brand you on that fleshy part between your thumb and your finger, or they would brand you in the middle of your hand. And there's that idea possibly that one of the reasons why they said, raise your right hand when you're giving evidence in court was they wanted to see whether you had already been convicted of a crime, whether they could actually trust you. And so there's a possibility that that's one of the reasons why early on, that's why, raise your right hand and, swear on the Bible, all had to do with checking to see whether that person was branded or not. So, wow, there's so many great, nuances and pieces of information about crime and what's going on. That is a whole field of study that you could, dive into and never hit the bottom. Are we there?
I mean, we could probably go to questions. We could also, you and I could just talk about this forever. That's probably pretty boring. So we better go to questions. But did you talk about the Naked Quaker book?
No.
That's a really cool book for reading this kind of thing.
Yeah, the Naked Quaker book has to do with mostly kind of earlier 17th century, and it's American. So you get lots of great anecdotes and ideas about what's happening, kind of a little bit more specifically New England, crime, 17th century, and the kinds of crimes that were going on, the kinds of things people were complaining about. Boy, totally different world than the world we live in. Wow. It's great book.
Yeah, I really like that book. The author kind of uses different cases that he's found through digging through records to examine what the time period was like.
Right.
And the kind of like halfway investigating that they did. It's just really a cool read.
Yeah, that whole idea about, the kind of proof that you would need or how much proof. Sometimes it didn't seem to take very much at all, and other times, depending on the crime, they wanted you couldn't prove it, and so people might bring that charge, but it never actually no one actually ever got punished for that because it was so hard to prove.
So Kyle says he's only got 5 questions right now. We're going to start on questions, but let's go, guys. Let's get some questions in here.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, so first question is, what did they do as far as forensic science? How did they find criminals?
A lot of, I don't think criminals tended to get found unless you had a pretty good idea of who they actually were. And many times what you would have to do in England at the time was to actually hire people to go out and bind this person. So you almost had sort of like bounty hunter guys. It's like, go out and get that guy. I know he did it, and we're going to drag him in front of the judge, and the judge will judge that situation and figure out whether he actually did it or not. And it might be much more difficult to prove. Many times it was sort of almost the crime was right out in the open, and if someone came and stole your watch, then later on in the newspaper there would be an advertisement, and it would be like, cool watch found, if you give me 50 pounds you can have it back. So the criminal would basically sell the item back to the person. It just I don't think there was. I think that whole concept of forensic science and the kind of almost the basic concept for Sherlock Holmes comes up in the 19th century, and I was reading about that, and I've basically forgotten all about that. It didn't stick very well in my head, but there's a particular real detective person that Sherlock Holmes is kind of based on. So there's some really great stuff there. But that's 19th century.
Could women get prosecuted for doing something their husbands told them to do?
I believe so. I don't think that just because someone told you to do it, let you off the hook. And there was plenty of women criminals in the 18th century. In fact, I just popped open the Crime and Punishment book that I've got here on the table, and it was just like women in crime. And it started off with some very gruesome stories about women criminals in the 18th century. So, but I don't think that would get you off the hook.
Were there any famous 18th century heists?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but there was a lot of that kind of thing going on, especially highwaymen. I mean, that is classic 18th century. You're traveling and stick 'em up. Somebody comes out of the woods and there you are. That is rife in the 18th century.
Question says, I was wondering how one would become an attorney in the 18th century England or colonial America.
I think it really depends on the place you're at. I think that it doesn't take nearly, basically you kind of say, I'm an attorney, that's about all it takes. You had to be actually, a man of learning to a certain extent. And depending on the place you were at, there may be more sort of coming before the bar and testing for that sort of. But I don't think it was nearly the same kind of rigorous thing that we have today, the kind of schooling that we have today. I think basically if you went to college, you could say, yeah, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to do anything else. It wasn't nearly as sort of narrow as we have today.
Have you ever read any personal accounts about the prison ships off of New York or New England?
Yes, and there's a great book. Boy, what is it, David? The Prison Jersey Ship, which has to do with prisoner of war, and just the story behind that is just gruesome and painful, and to read about how bad those situations were. But that same kind of thing, I mean, that was a military prison. And that happened both in the American Revolution, and that also happened, I think, War of 1812, the same kind of situation where people would actually be taken prisoner here in North America, and then they would be in different prisons. And then at one point, some of them were shipped to England, and they were kept as prisoners there, and at times on prison hulks in England. And one of the things that happens right after, basically during the Revolution, right after the Revolution with criminals in England, was that they didn't have places to transport them, and so they started using prison ships in England for their standard prisoners. So that was used both as a military prison situation and a civilian prison situation. But I don't think it lasted too long for a civilian thing, because it was just so devastating to the population that they started transporting them, because it was just inhumane.
Do you know what the most common crimes in America were in the 18th century?
Oh, wow. I wish I had that kind of information at my fingertips. I've got a great book that I'm reading through right now that covers some of that kind of information. And unfortunately, I don't even have the book here to point you to that reference. So, no, sorry, don't have that one.
Was there any criminal punishment for food adulteration?
The food adulterations, things that I've read about, and specifically they had those kind of rules in England, they tended to be fines. And at times, say like, a baker who was putting things in his bread that he shouldn't be putting in, generally chalk and some other items like that, they might put a sign around his neck. They might ride him around town on a rail. They would definitely fine them if they really were unhappy with that. And at times they would drive them out of town and not let them be a baker.
Was public humiliation like a big thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
The pillory, whipping, all those things are pretty typical kinds of that lower level punishment, or even kind of civil punishment situations. That was, again, the kind of thing you do not see now, at least, in North America. That kind of thing doesn't happen. But that was a typical, it's like, well, we don't want to put you in jail, so we're gonna do this. Maybe that will change your behavior. But then again, I don't think they had anything like that whole idea of, the concept of rehabilitating the criminal. That wasn't what they were doing. It's like, it was punishment. That's what it was.
Got a donation with a question.
Great.
Storm Brewer, $2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did criminals get a ritual, last meal, or cigarette?
Wow. I don't remember. I haven't recently read about. You're talking about a specific situation where they're ending their life, and I don't remember reading about that, so I don't have a good answer for you on that one. I'm pretty sure they definitely had access to clergy, but other than that, I'm not sure what other kind of perks there were, if you could call it that.
Hey, let's talk about those mugs again, since you've got it in your hand.
Yeah. Hey, we're doing a special. These just came in just a couple of days ago. We haven't had any of these guys for months. It takes quite a while for these to kind of go through the the making process and the ordering process. But these mugs have our old logo on it. They kind of old sign logo. And we have these in just 2 colors, and we have a very limited quantity. And in the past, they have gone all right away. We've sold them within a 24-hour period or even less. So these guys will be on sale for the next hour and a half or so. I don't know what time it is, but the sale will probably run until about 6 o'clock tonight. So if you want to get a special price on these while they're available, because they don't last long, and there's the beautiful black with the blue, and then there's the solid sort of matte paprika color. So what am I doing?
And
oh yeah,
you have autographed.
Oh yeah, and look at that. I'll sign each one of them so that if you want a John signed mug, and if you don't want a John signed mug, just keep it on. You don't have to look at the bottom. So there.
He signed mine, and I used some rubbing alcohol to get it off, so you can do that as well.
No, actually, we tested these out. After I signed them, it lasts pretty well. I mean, even after 4 or 5 washings, we couldn't detect it washing away. So the signature stands up really well to washing.
So to summarize, it's an autographed mug.
Yes.
For how much off?
They're $20 right now.
Yes.
For $20.
They're normally $24.
Yep.
But they don't last long.
And,
just for the live stream.
And these
people.
mugs are they're logo mugs, but they're they're handmade here in the United States. So really nice pieces.
That's all we have to say about that.
Yeah.
Okay, back to questions.
Yeah, and for questions, you don't have to narrow into just crime and punishment. If you want to ask any crazy question, might not answer it, but it's all up to you.
18th century question.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Right.
I don't even care.
What's the meaning of life, John?
Yeah.
42. Next.
Speaking about like corporal punishment and public humiliation, when and why was dunking used as a punishment?
I believe you'll see dunking showing up more in the 17th century. The why? I don't know. Because it was humiliating? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for the why.
Was there life in prison, and was that an option for only really bad crimes like murder?
No, if you murdered somebody, they'd just kill you. No, they did not have the sort of detention situation that we have. It starts to show up in the late 18th century in England, but really they used, it was not, there was a little bit of keeping people in prison, but generally it was transport them, maybe brand them, maybe pillory them or whatever. But if it was bad, they'd transport you, and if it was anything like really bad, they just executed you. That's the end of story.
Was tar and feathering really a thing?
Yes, it was. Tar and feathering was happening a lot here in North America for all kinds of situations, and you can imagine, pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. Talk about humiliation and pain and suffering, all there, stacked together.
Well, on that, was that an actual sentencing, or was that more of a mob mentality kind of thing?
No, it was a mob kind of a thing going on. Yeah.
For thieves who were multiple offenders, would one of the punishments be to cut off one of their hands?
I don't want to answer that one because I'm not sure that I'd be right if I did. There may have been some of that, but I don't think it's actually happening in North America. I don't think it gets any worse than maybe taking off a finger. I think mostly it was branding, and it was like, yep, next level up. You're transported, and the level up from that is, you're dead. So it's really strange. And if you look in the records, the amount of money it took you to kind of pop up a level to get into some of those really bad things was a tiny amount of money that what we would think. It was probably something like any crime where someone stole over $20, and you're transported. It was really, and that drove a lot of crime, because you figure, hey, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? It's like, well, if I'm going to steal a little bit, I might as well steal a lot. If the crime is, if the threshold for getting hung is very low, then why do a middling crime? I'll do a big crime and maybe I'll get away with it. So it had some unintended consequences to that very, very strict punishment system.
Were there different punishments for child or juvenile crime? Would kids get punished, or would parents?
Wow, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that one. Sorry. I think I want to pull back in my head and say yes. I'm pretty sure the kids get punished to a fairly low level. I don't think that was tolerated to any great extent at all.
You mentioned branding as a common punishment. Or was it a common punishment at sea with trading companies?
At sea with trading companies. How crime is happening, and I'm not sure whether you mean actually, on board ship, right? If that's what's implied in the question.
I think she's implying pirates would get a P put on their hand or something like that.
I don't think they even,
because trading companies.
Pirates would get drugged to the nearest court on shore, and then they would get hung. I mean, that was that. There was very little, let's say, wishy-washy there with pirates. See, they were very strict on that kind of situation. If they could get those people, but generally, I don't think they were caught all that often. I think most of the time they probably died of their lifestyle of that situation, because that's a rough life.
Let me do a donation real quick, and
Okay.
then we can do whatever. I don't know what else we have planned. Whatever we want to do. Okay, $20 from Caden Austin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping history alive. Your shows are my favorite thing on YouTube, and every time I get a notification, I have to watch. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hey, let's talk about Kalamazoo again.
Kalamazoo is coming up this weekend, and Saturday and Sunday. The event is happening at the fairgrounds, the Expo Center at Kalamazoo, Michigan. We will be there. It's the Living History Show, and there's a lot happening at the show. They have 3 big rooms full of vendors, and if anybody in this area that's connected with living history tends to go there. So it's one of those great events where a lot of people get to see old friends they haven't seen over the winter. But it's also great if you're interested, you've never kind of connected with living history, or especially vendors, and you're in that area, and it's a great event to go to. We would love to see you there. It happens on Saturday and Sunday, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
I put a link in the description just
good.
now. It's under the mugs.
Okay.
So for folks that haven't been to an event like that, what might they see for sale? What types of things?
Yeah, so at that event, it's an indoor show. Excuse me. I'm going to have to cough somewhere in here. It's an indoor show. So there's just tables and vendors and different units at that. And you will see people, some a bit of demonstrating, but you'll see gunsmiths, lots of knife work, leather people selling clothing. I don't think there's very many sort of old pieces there. Normally it's all reproductions, but everything through, say, 1700 to, I think it goes up to even Civil War folks you'll see there. So it's a fairly wide timeline event, and it's just a mostly around vendors and their tables. So lots of activity up there, and a lot of reenactors go up dressed, so you get to see a lot of folks in their outfits.
I'm also thinking about people that we've worked with the channel that will be there. I know that Parson and Maggie will be there, so folks will be able to see them perform, see what that's all about.
Right.
I'm trying to think of who else. I know that we did a video with Weaver. He'll be there. He's always there. and some other folks that if you've seen them demonstrate in our videos, a lot of them will be there selling what they make. It's really cool.
Right. Great event.
Were there any written laws in the frontier, or did they all have to abide by laws established in the colonies?
I think what you're getting at there is a lot. There's this kind of weird transition of laws. So, before the Revolution, were British colonies. The colonies kind of get all the laws of Great Britain, and then sometimes there's local laws that are variations on those, or sometimes kind of totally different. But if you go back further into the wilderness, no, there's no law at all. In fact, if you read Woodmason's book that I talked about several weeks ago, he talks about the backcountry of South Carolina in that 1760 kind of time period. And there was a great problem with there being no law, no law keepers, no law, no courts, no nothing in the backcountry. And so there would be just giant bands or gangs of criminals, and there was the local population had basically no recourse but to form their own sort of vigilante law enforcement and fight these people back. And the colonial government that was back in Charleston was very upset with that they were taking that law into their own hands kind of situation. But there was no law, so basically, if you had that colonial law, it's happening at the coasts, and then inward from that, it is almost it's the Wild West in a truest sense.
When did the government decide mobs couldn't lay down the law in communities?
I don't think governments ever thought that mob law was the way to go. And I think a lot of times it was any of those colonial governments in that same sense as that South Carolina problem, that was always, they saw that as a usurping of their power. And so they're going to do their utmost to squelch that kind of problem.
Hey, we've got a food question.
A food question!
Says, please tell me why puddings of the 18th century are cake and not pudding.
Well, puddings are all sorts of things in the 18th century. There's a lot of different kinds of puddings. Puddings start out to be things boiled in a stomach, like a haggis, right? And that was, pudding kind of has a sense of guts and that kind of thing, because the pudding bag of the 16th, 17th century is a stomach or is an intestine or something like that. It isn't until somewhere there that in the 17th, 18th century, that they come up with the concept of, hey, we don't need to have a gut. We can use some fabric, and we'll boil this thing inside of a fabric bag. And then we get a transition where puddings start to be not just boiled, but baked. Early on, ovens were something that wasn't very common. Later, the ovens start to become more and more common in the 18th century and in the 19th century. So we start to see the same kind of ingredients, basically like a sausage, right? Lots of different kinds of ingredients kind of put all together, and they bake it instead of boil it. I forgot what the question was already.
Puddings.
Yeah, but what was the nuance of the pudding?
Why were they cakes and not puddings?
Oh, yeah. So they end up with a cakey kind of texture. There were puddings that were quaking puddings that were like a custard. They were still boiled in a bag. And so you get a little bit more of the concept of what we have in North America today as a pudding being something that's like a custard thing. That really doesn't start to show up much in the 18th century. There's a little bit, that quaking pudding, but it doesn't really start to evolve into the pudding that we think of until later on in the 19th century, where we get that total custard kind of thing going on.
Had a question about clear cakes and if we planned on doing an episode on them.
Yes, I'm going to do clear cakes. Yes. Clear cakes look like a lot of fun. We'll be working on clear cakes sometime soon. We're going to try to find a couple more candy kind of episodes. There was clear cakes. There was something else that seemed really interesting in that kind of candy realm. There's a lot of those little, they called them cakes, but they really were sort of not anything like what, of course, we would call the cake. Yep.
How common was tax evasion, and how was it punished in the 18th century?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great topic. I'd need to research that one a little bit more in depth. They had, off the side of that, they have debtors' prisons, which are a great topic to cover. And that whole idea of, I'm in debt, somebody calls your debt, you can't pay it, so they put you in prison until you pay it. And of course, how are you supposed to pay a debt when you're in prison? Great topic, and one of those kind of situations where, and in the debtor's prison, they don't even feed you. So you got to figure out how to feed yourself and figure out how to pay off your debt. Usually people had to come to your rescue, pay your debt for you to get you out of debtor's prison. If you didn't have any friends, you might not get out.
All right, let's talk about this Instagram contest one more time.
Instagram contest each week here on the live stream. We pick out a Instagram contestant. So if you are interested in being part of this little Instagram thing, all you have to do is hashtag Townsends. And one time each week we pick out a picture that kind of catches our fancy on Instagram, and we send them a gift certificate. We connect with them. So this week it is, what's the picture?
Well, it's a recipe somebody made.
Yeah, the
Adrian Glenn.
Right, Adrian Glenn.
And it was the steaks.
Yeah, the steaks fried in ale. And I know everybody's complaining about steaks fried in ale. They're not really fried. But that's what the recipe called it, so that's what I'm calling it.
And then I think we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Let's talk about these mugs again. The mug in your hand, yeah.
One more time before we sign off here. These new throwback mugs. I got two new colors. We got paprika here, the kind of cool brick red. And then we've got this wonderful black with blue. This is the one that everybody's like, ooh, John, I'm going to take one of these home. Get away from here. But these have the great Townsends logo, the old sign version of it says James Townsend and Son on it. On the bottom, I'm going to sign each one of these, and these are available for the next, say, hour and 15 minutes or whatever for special price, $20 on the website. After that, they'll be going up to their normal price. And these are a lot of fun, and they've all the ones in the past have sold out really quickly. So if you're interested in one, better jump on it right now. And I really want to thank everyone for joining us on this live stream. And if you're going to be up in Kalamazoo, make sure to check us out this weekend. But I want to thank everyone for coming along, all the great questions and all the wonderful support on Super Chat, support. We got some great new supporters on Patreon, and I really want to thank everyone for all the support they got. And even if you can't support us that way, if you comment on our videos, that helps us. If you share our videos, that helps us. So thank you for everything you do, and thanks for watching.